H-BAMN is dedicated to the radical improvement of the Black community with a specific focus on insulin resistance. The reason why we focus so heavily on insulin resistance is because insulin resistance is the foundation that so many conditions that plague our community are sitting on top of. I'm talking about stroke, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, cancer, and so much more. We need to understand that although insulin resistance is a huge problem, it's not a problem that has to exist. In this video, I'm going to clearly explain what insulin resistance is, how it came to be, why it's such a problem, and what you can do to prevent it and or reverse it. Stay tuned. What's going on, family? This is Edward Williams, licensed physician assistant and founder and creator of Health by Any Means Necessary, and I want to welcome you to our channel where we talk about all things Black health improvement and insulin resistance. So if you're new around here, go ahead and click the subscribe button, hit the little bell, that way you can be notified every single week when we drop a new video or do a live. All right, so before we jump into the topic of insulin resistance, first I need to go over what we call Health Defense 101. Health Defense 101 deals with the basic anatomy and physiology. This is just so we can understand how the body works on a normal basis. That way we can understand what happens when things go wrong. So let's go through that first. So in your body, you have an organ called the pancreas. The pancreas is a small organ. It sits more so on the left side of your body, right behind your stomach. It's about the size of your hand. Now, the pancreas is responsible for secreting several hormones, but for the sake of this video, we're going to talk about two. One is insulin, the other one is called glucagon. All right, so let's start with insulin. So insulin is a hormone that is secreted by the pancreas. Insulin has several functions, but as it pertains to this video and this topic, we're going to talk about two of those functions. One, insulin is an anabolic hormone. This means that it helps the cells to build up and to grow. And two, insulin is a storage hormone. This means that it helps our bodies to store nutrients, and it's going to store nutrients in the cells. That way the cells can use those nutrients to create more cells or for energy. So when we eat food, all of the food we eat are composed of what they call macronutrients. Macronutrients are your carbohydrates, your proteins, and your fats. Now, when you eat food, your body can't use that food in the current form that it's in. And so your body's going to break down that food into smaller nutritional units. In the case of carbohydrates, it's going to break it down into what they call glucose. In the case of proteins, it's going to break it down into what we call amino acids. And in the case of fat, it's going to break it down to what we call fatty acids. Now, remember when I told you earlier about insulin being a storage hormone? So once we eat, all of those nutrients are going to be absorbed into the bloodstream. Now, in the case of carbohydrates, which are going to be broken down into glucose, glucose is going to stimulate the pancreas to release insulin. The reason why the pancreas is going to do this is because insulin will now act on the insulin receptor on your cells. We have trillions of cells and they all have insulin receptors. Once insulin acts on this insulin receptor, that will now allow glucose to be shuttled in through the GLUT4 receptor. And that glucose, once it gets inside the cell, is going to do two things. One, it's going to be used as energy for right then and there, or it's going to be stored. When your cells takes glucose and converts it into a stored form of glucose, this is called glycogen. Now, the reason why your body is going to do this is because if we have to go hours without food, well, your cells have a stored form of the fuel called glycogen. Therefore, it's a very easy process for your body to convert that glucose into glycogen. This is called glycogenesis. Now, the reverse is also easy for the body as well. When the cell is going to break down that glycogen and turn it into glucose, this is a very easy process for your body. It's called glycogenolysis. This is the breaking down of glycogen into glucose so that your cell can now use that for fuel. Overall, we need to understand that the body is all about stability, balance. In science and biology, we call this homeostasis. Not too high and not too low. Your body has multiple built-in mechanisms to make sure that the body is staying right there in homeostasis. In the case of blood sugar, your body wants to make sure that you stay between a range of 70 milligrams per deciliter all the way up to 120 milligrams per deciliter. Now, If your body at any time senses your blood sugar going too high or too low, it's going to do one of two things. One we're already familiar with. It's going to secrete insulin. Insulin secreted from the pancreas will now come in and it's going to help shuttle that glucose into the cell. However, in the case where your glucose is going too low, your body is going to secrete that second hormone that I told you about, and that's called glucagon. If you listen to the name glucagon, this is how you can remember the function of glucagon. Glucagon will now be released from the pancreas, and its job will be to knock on the doors of those cells and tell them to turn that glycogen into glucose so that it can be used as energy. Once again, glucagon is going to make sure that your body is converting the glycogen into glucose so that it can be used. The reason why the body is doing this is because, once again, too high is an emergency because it can cause a diabetic coma. It can also cause inflammation and damage to the arteries, the lining of the arteries. However, being too low is an emergency for the body as well, because this as well can cause what they call a diabetic coma. Your brain needs a constant supply of glucose. And if you're not getting that constant supply of glucose, this is an emergency. Make sure we understand that part. Too high is an emergency. Too low is an emergency. Your body wants to stay right there in the middle. For the body, it's going to be 70 milligrams per deciliter all the way up to 120 milligrams per deciliter. Your body balancing this back into the middle is what it's supposed to do. That is natural. That is a mechanism. Now, here's the next part that you need to know. So when it comes to storing glucose, your body has really two ways of storing that glucose. One we already spoke about, glycogen. The next way your body can store that glucose is called converting into fat. Taking glucose and converting it into fat is a process called de novo lipogenesis. Now, regardless of the form that glucose is stored in, there's only three places that stored glucose can be stored in. The first place is your muscle cells. So your body will store glucose in your muscle cells as glycogen or as fat. It doesn't want to store it as fat. Or your body can store glucose inside of your liver cells, your hepatocytes, as glycogen, or it can store it as fat. It doesn't want to store it as fat. Or your body can store glucose in the form of fat in the fat cells, the adipocytes. This it wants to do if it needs to. Now, an important question to ask is, we talked about how the cell has a max capacity for glucose. The next question would be, does it have a max capacity for glycogen? And if you're asking yourself that question, that's a very intelligent question, because this next part is very important to understand, because this is where the medical community and the healthcare system as a whole goes wrong when it comes to this whole thing about type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance. So what does the body do when it becomes filled to capacity with both glucose and glycogen? In that case, your body understands that your cells are at full capacity. And it also understands that if we try to force any more glycogen or glucose in that cell, it's going to wreak metabolic havoc, also known as intracellular AGE, advanced glycation end products, which is something I'll explain in another video. However, what you need to know is that your body does not want to do this. Once your body or your cells have realized that we are at full capacity with glucose or in glycogen and we can't take on any more, we are going to down-regulate the insulin receptors. Your body's down-regulating the insulin receptors because the insulin receptor is allowing insulin in, which is allowing the glucose to come in. And so what your body is going to do is it's going to down-regulate the insulin receptors. That way it's not available for the insulin to go into to activate on. When this happens, no more glucose will be entering the cell. In other words, your cell has just become resistant to insulin. Make sure you catch that part. If you need to rewind the video, please rewind the video. But this part is very, very important. Your body has made the intelligent decision to downregulate the insulin receptors because those cells are at max capacity. Any more sugar could cause damage to the cell. Therefore, your body will downregulate insulin receptors on purpose. This is called insulin resistance. It's not a disease. It's not a dysfunction. And it's not a problem per se. It is something your body is doing on purpose, is an intelligent protective mechanism. Please don't forget that. Now, when it comes to your muscle cells, what they call the peripheral cells, once they have become insulin resistant or they downregulated their insulin receptors because they're at max capacity, the glucose will now be redirected back to the liver. Once they get redirected back to the liver, your liver sees the surplus of glucose, and your liver will now have the hard task of taking that glucose or that glycogen and converting it into fat. Once again, this is called de novo lipogenesis. Your liver will now try to turn that glycogen into fat, and that way it's going to ship it out to your fat cells, your adipocyte. The reason why your liver wants to do this is because that's where fat belongs. Fat doesn't belong in your muscle cells, and it doesn't belong in your liver. Fat is an organ. It doesn't belong in organs. And so your liver is going to do the best it can to convert that glucose into fat and ship it out to the fat cells where it belongs. However, if we look at the process of how the glucose became elevated, it all started with us eating. And so if your liver is working towards getting the body back into homeostasis by taking the glucose and turning into fat, that way it can be shipped out to the fat cells. What happens if we just ate a meal that caused the glucose to increase, which causes the insulin to be secreted from the pancreas in order to put the glucose in the cells, and the cells are now downregulating the insulin receptors because they're at full capacity, which is causing the body to redirect the insulin, the glucose, to the liver so that it can be converted into fat to be shipped out to the fat cells. What happens if we turn around and eat, I don't know, let's say another 2 or 3 hours, or let's say we do this 6 times a day, like everybody's been recommended to do? What happens in that situation? Well, what's going to happen is that you're going to get a backup of blood glucose that is waiting to be converted into fat to be shipped out to your fat cells, because there's simply no more room. There's no more space for the glucose or the glycogen inside those cells. And so as that backup is continuing and your body is trying to process this new food that you just ate, and the new food that you're going to eat from 2 hours from now, and the new food that you're going to eat from the 2 hours from after that, or the drink that you're eating on top of that, you now have your blood sugar going up from 120 to 140, from 140 to 160, 160 to 200. And if this continues to happen every single day, day in and day out, and we're drinking juice on top of that, or we're drinking soda on top of that, this is going to cause hyperinsulinemia. High insulin levels, once again, will cause insulin resistance. The high insulin levels will cause the insulin receptors to downregulate. This means that the blood sugar has nowhere to go other than the bloodstream, which makes your blood sugar high. The blood sugar being high is going to be noticed by the pancreas, which is going to secrete more insulin, which is going to make you more resistant, which is going to cause more glucose. You see this vicious cycle that's happening? And so your body will now become insulin resistant on a chronic level, and it's going to start to struggle with storing that glucose as fat. And when that starts to happen and we start eating frequently, what's going to happen is that fat is going to get stored in places that it should not be stored. The main place that it should not be stored, that it will be stored, is going to be your liver and your pancreas. Once fat starts to get stored in your liver, once again, this is really going to slow down the function of converting that glucose into fat and shipping it out. This means that the blood sugar is going to go higher and higher and higher. And once the pancreas is infiltrated with the fat, this is going to slow down the function of that pancreas over time. Now, this part usually takes some time, but when you start slowing down the function of that pancreas, this means that when it comes time to secrete insulin, you're not going to secrete as much insulin as the body wants to secrete. However, when it comes time to secrete glucose, the same is going to happen. You're not going to be able to secrete as much glucagon as you want to. And so you're going to have a situation where it looks like your pancreas is no longer functioning. It's going to look like your pancreas is, I don't know, burnt out. But that's not the case. what's going on is that you have fat infiltration inside of your pancreas where it should not be. The same is with the liver. You have fat infiltration inside the liver where it should not be. In both situations, we call the fat in the liver fatty liver and the fat in the pancreas fatty pancreas. So that whole thing that I just explained is called insulin resistance. And what we need to understand is that, once again, insulin resistance is not a disease, it's not a dysfunction, and it's not a malfunction. This is a protective mechanism. This is an intelligent response by your body. This is what your body's supposed to do. What else do we expect it to do in the face of that type of situation? If your body does not have the wherewithal to act in the face of reality as far as high blood sugar and high insulin, then we have major problems. And so if it's a protective mechanism, which it is, then we need to understand that it has been activated. And that's why I call it insulin resistance activated. So we need to figure out how insulin resistance was activated. And there's several things that will activate insulin resistance. The first one is nutritional colonizers. Now, for those who are not familiar with my work, I'll do a brief overview of what nutritional colonizers are. However, stay tuned, make sure you subscribe to the channel because everything that I'm saying, I'm going to explain more in depth coming up. But nutritional colonizers are simply processed foods. Now, the reason why I call them nutritional colonizers is because we have to understand that these processed foods, they act in two ways. One, they wreak metabolic havoc by coming into your body and increasing the glucose, increasing the insulin, and increasing inflammation. These foods, they have no fiber, no nutrients. They are stripped of anything that could be valuable to it. And so on one hand, you have the processed foods that are wreaking metabolic havoc. And that is already a problem. However, there's another campaign to these nutritional colonizers, and that is the stripping away of your natural resources, also known as your vitamins and your minerals. So your body is intelligent enough to heal, recover, and repair from the first attack with the nutritional colonizers, the first attack of the processed foods. And the way your body would naturally defend itself and recover and heal is by utilizing the minerals in the body, such as the calcium, the magnesium, potassium. Your body already has weapons to defend itself. The problem with the processed foods, there's multiple problems, but one of the problems with the processed foods is that not only does it cause inflammation, high insulin, and high glucose, but it's also robbing your body of its natural resources. It's robbing your body of the calcium, the potassium, the magnesium. It's robbing your body of the vitamin D, the hormone D, which is a huge problem. And so the very things that your body would use to defend itself and to heal and recover is being stolen by the nutritional colonizers. And so when your body goes to recover and defend itself, it's like the hands are tied behind its back. Your body's hands are tied behind its back. It doesn't have the resources to defend itself. And so that's why we call it nutritional colonizers. And nutritional colonizers are the main actors or the main activators in this process we call insulin resistance. Now, here's something that I need for everyone to really understand. It is almost impossible to become insulin resistant, diabetic, hypertensive, or any of these things without processed foods. I mean, you can go and sit in a sugarcane field and chew on sugarcane all day long until your jaw fall out. You're not going to become insulin resistant. That's not the way nature designed the food. Before you become insulin resistant, your jaw would literally fall out. So you need processed foods to become insulin resistant. And I need for you all to understand that because I understand that we've been told and we've been sold this lie that it just runs in our family. And that's not the truth. The truth is that we need these foods to become insulin resistant. Next, so although the nutritional colonizers, the processed foods are a main component or the major component for becoming insulin resistant, it's not enough. Because if you have someone who's eating these type of foods once a day, the chances of them becoming insulin resistant is very slim. They would have to eat this type of food frequently, such as every 2 to 3 hours or 6 meals a day, like we've all been told. So the next component as far as becoming insulin resistant is frequent eating. We're not designed to eat frequently. We're not designed to be eating from the moment we wake up all the way into the moment we fall asleep. That is not natural to the body. And if you look at the physiology of how I was explaining insulin and glucose works, and you see that it takes time to utilize the glucose in the cell and utilize the glycogen in the cell, and it takes time to convert the glucose to fat, then you will understand that if I'm continuously adding more fuel to this fire every 2 to 3 hours, it's only a matter of time before you become resistant. And so the next activator in this equation of insulin resistant is frequency, eating frequently. The next activator for becoming insulin resistant is lack of movement. We're designed to move. So once you have that glucose in your cell, the glucose is there for energy in the now or potential energy. So when we're talking about glucose being used as fuel for our cells, we have to understand that the body has a certain amount of energy that it's using no matter what you're doing. When you're just at a standstill and you're just laying in bed, you're just breathing and you're just watching TV or you're just doing nothing, this is called your basic metabolic rate. Your basal metabolic rate is essentially the amount of energy your body is using to do nothing. And so the more you do, the more energy you're going to need. However, that basic amount is going to still bring down the blood sugar a tiny amount. But if you really want to kick it up a notch, you get up, you walk, you jog, you run, you lift weights, you exercise, you jump, you move around, and this will start to really bring down that blood sugar. And this is why not moving, it allows that problem to remain the same because you're not really using much fuel. And so the excess fuel that you have, you're not even using that. And so it's just staying in the bloodstream. However, when you start to move around, you really start to get the heart pumping, you start breathing hard, well, that requires energy. And luckily for you or anyone in this situation, you have more than enough energy that will be utilized by the cells. Now, those are the major activators of insulin resistance, but of course, there are other things that can also increase insulin and glucose, such as stress. Stress does it. Drinking juice and soda, that will definitely do it. We talked about, lack of movement, but also there are medications that will do the same. So once again, subscribe to the channel because I'll be doing videos about every single one of those and you don't want to miss it. Now, why is all of this a problem? Why is insulin resistance such a problem? Well, first we need to understand that insulin resistance has been activated based on our lifestyle choices. The same way we activate it, we can now deactivate it, and we will cover that as well. As far as why it's a problem, we need to understand that having high glucose and high insulin is unnatural for the body. The body doesn't want this to happen. The reason why is because high levels of insulin and glucose causes major issues for your vasculature. Now, when we're talking about vasculature, in this video, I'm going to be talking about microvasculature and macrovasculature. Micro being the smaller vessels, macro being the larger blood vessels. So when we're talking about microvascular diseases or conditions, we're talking about the smaller vessels that are going to your eyes, your kidneys, and your nerves. That high amount of glucose and insulin is going to cause inflammation and deterioration of those arteries. And when this deterioration starts to happen, in the case of the eye, when it starts to cause damage to those vessels, specifically to the retina, this is going to cause retinopathy, which leads to blindness. To your kidneys, it's going to cause what they call nephropathy, which leads to kidney failure. And in the case of your nerves, it's going to cause neuropathy, which leads to the tingling and the numbness that so many people feel and deal with. Now, the same way that the insulin and high glucose is causing damage to the smaller vasculature, it's going to cause damage to the larger vasculature as well too. And this is what we call macrovascular conditions. This is going to be the vasculature leading to your brain, your heart, and also to your extremities, your legs. When this damage is occurring and inflammation is occurring, you're going to run the risk of having atherosclerosis, which is the buildup of plaque, arteriosclerosis, which is the stiffening of those arteries. Those arteries will now try to repair itself. That repair may break off and cause what they call a clot or embolism. And when this all happens, it's going to cause larger problems such as a stroke, heart attack, or what we call PAD, which is peripheral arterial disease. This is pain in the legs when people are walking. And as if those weren't enough, high insulin levels is going to affect all areas of your body. And this is why they call it the whole body disease when they're talking about high insulin levels, because really no organ or no part of your body is going to be spared. And so for women, the ovaries are going to be affected, and that's called PCOS. For men, the testicles are going to be affected, and that's called gynecomastia, hypogonadism. Also, the brain is going to be affected, Alzheimer's, dementia. And also, when we think about what insulin does, insulin is an anabolic hormone. It helps with cell proliferation, and high insulin levels has a high correlation with cancer, which is the out of control growth of cells to the point where it causes death. Also, high insulin and glucose levels make the perfect environment for infections, fungal infections, bacterial infections. It makes it very hard for people to heal when they get sick. They're slower to recover from an abrasion or some type of wound. They get more UTIs. They also get sicker faster. And so there's so many things that takes place when you have high glucose and high insulin levels, or when you're just insulin resistant. And this is why it's such a huge problem. And when we look at our community, we can see the heart disease, we can see the stroke, we can see the high blood pressure, the obesity, we can see all of these things. And that's why it's something that we focus on intensely. All right, so we spoke about what insulin resistance is. We also spoke about how insulin resistance is created. We talked about the problems with being insulin resistant and all the complications that come along with it. Now, how do you know if you are insulin resistant? Well, there's several things you can do. We have what we call signs and symptoms. Signs are things that can be verified by a third party. So it's not only something that you experience, it's something that everyone else can also see. This will be something like checking your finger stick. So you see it, I see it. We see that it says 200. I see it says 200. I'm insulin resistant. Also, by getting blood work, if you check your A1C, yes, that is a way to tell if you're insulin resistant. More specifically, that tells you if you are type 2 diabetic or pre-diabetic. If you are in the range of what they call 5.7 all the way up to 6.4 is what they consider to be pre-diabetic. And if it's above that 6.4, you are what they consider to be diabetic. So the A1C, hemoglobin A1C, is a blood marker that pretty much tells you your average of blood sugar for the past 3 to 4 months. That's a good lab to get to find out if you are pre-diabetic or diabetic, but it won't tell you for sure if you are insulin resistant. And I've seen this plenty of times because I've been seeing patients for so long, and I've seen so many patients dealing with this very condition where I can be doing a physical examination and this patients tell me that they know for a fact they're not diabetic, and they're right. They could very well be right. However, I'm seeing certain markings, I'm seeing certain things on the physical exam, and I know that they're insulin resistant. And so in order for me to really find out, I need to order what they call a fasting insulin level, a fasting plasma insulin level. Now, this is a test that most people miss, most people are not aware about. Most times they won't be ordered because your insurance probably won't pay for it. So much for that. However, if your fasting insulin level is above a 5, then you are insulin resistant at some level. Your insulin level should be below 5 in order for you not to be insulin resistant. And so that is really the definitive test. Also, there is what we call a 2-hour oral glucose tolerance test. This is where you're drinking like 75 grams of sugar. It's very hard in the body, but that will definitely let you know if you're insulin resistant, because you're going to now see just how your body's responding as you're drinking that drink for the next 2 hours, and how well the body's dealing with that high amount of sugar and high amount of glucose. And so there's going to be other signs and symptoms to really figure out if you might be insulin resistant. And so in the case of symptoms are things that only you can actually experience and you feel. This would be something like back pain. You know, if you have back pain, I just have to take your word for it. I can't feel it, but you can feel it. If you have tingling and numbness in your feet and your legs, I just have to take your word for it. Those are symptoms. Symptoms are things that only you are experiencing. So to really kind of give you the full signs and symptoms of being insulin resistant, what I'm going to do is read from my brand new book called Done with Diabetes. This is 5 simple strategies to reverse diabetes, get off medications, and avoid complications in 90 days. Brand new book. It's completely free. All you have to do is pay the shipping. And if you want to get that, click the link below and you can get your copy shipped out to you. And actually everything that I'm talking about is coming straight from this book. So go ahead, get your copy. So as far as the rest of the signs and symptoms of being insulin resistant, we're talking about fatigue, acne, skin tags, increased hunger, brain fog, difficulty concentrating, weight gain, especially around the midsection, difficulty losing weight, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, dark skin patches called acanthos nigricans, irregular menses, breast enlargement in men, erectile dysfunction, frequent urination, blurry vision, excessive thirst, frequent infections of the skin, urinary tract or vagina, poor wound healing, irritability, tingling in the hands and feet. So as you see, there's a lot of signs and symptoms that could denote the fact that you might be insulin resistant. But to know for sure, make sure you speak with your practitioner, get the lab work, also by, gathering your signs and symptoms that you have experienced as well too. And that can let you know if you are insulin resistant. Now, once you find out that you might be insulin resistant or you're someone who wants to prevent insulin resistance, what do we do? So once again, I'm pulling from this brand new book that I just wrote. It's called Done with Diabetes, 5 Simple Strategies to Reverse Diabetes, Get Off Medications and Avoid Complications in 90 Days. So in this book, I talk about 5 strategies. And these 5 strategies, once again, I'm going to keep on talking about these 5 strategies because they're simple, they're practical, and they're sustainable. And these 5 strategies, the biggest obstacle that I have to deal with when it comes to these 5 strategies is that it seems too simple. It seems too easy. And I understand why people would feel like that because you're taking medication after medication, you're doing injections, you're doing all these examinations, you're taking a metformin with a sulfonylurea like glimepiride or glipizide, you're doing the Toujeo, you're doing the insulin injections, you're doing all of these things and you're going to the medical facilities and they have all of their multi-million-dollar tests and labs and diagnostics and they're doing all of these things. You got people who have white coats and stethoscopes and surely they know what they're talking about. And so when I come and I give you these 5 simple strategies and you're like, that's going to fix my problem. And I'm like, yeah, I understand that it's hard to believe because you've been told so much except for these 5 simple things that it's hard to really believe that it's going to work for you. And so what you need to understand is that what I'm giving you in this book and also what I'm giving you in this video is something that I've seen work with hundreds of patients, members, and clients. All right, so when it comes to the first strategy is just say no. And just say no pertains to the nutritional colonizers. So I talked about nutritional colonizers earlier in this video, but you need to understand that once again, it's almost impossible to become diabetic or insulin resistant without the use of processed foods, also known as nutritional colonizers. And so this is a huge issue. And it is a major part of this insulin resistance equation. And so if you decrease and or completely cut out, which is the ideal thing to do, but if you cut out these foods or you dramatically decrease these foods, that's going to give you a strong step forward in the right direction as far as reversing and or preventing insulin resistance. And so you have to understand that these foods do more than just increase your glucose. They strip you, they rob you of your nutrients. And so that's the first step. Decrease the nutritional colonizers, decrease processed foods. So in addition to cutting out the food, make sure you cut out the juices, especially the sodas. Sodas are diabetic fuel in a can. Please cut that out because that is increasing your glucose in a way that surpasses what the food can do because it's liquid. It's liquid. It's going to make it skyrocket. Please decrease that. So please cut that out of your life because it is doing great damage. Strategy number 2, just say yes. Just say yes to what? Real whole foods. So we have to understand that one, if the nutritional colonizers are extremely bad because they're taking away so much and they're causing so much of a problem, we have to understand that whole foods does the exact opposite. Whole foods come equipped with a whole entire community of nutrients that are ready to provide healing and repairing to your body. Whole foods come equipped with the vitamins, the minerals, the phytonutrients. They also have the fiber. And these whole foods will help to heal and recover your body. as well as give it the nourishment that it's going to need to bring down the glucose and bring down the insulin as well. So please say yes to whole foods, because this is what you're going to need to actually reverse this process from taking place. So here at H-BAMN, we are plant strong, and our definition of being plant strong means that we strongly recommend that you eat 70 to 80% plant food. This means that most of your food should be coming from plants. And if you are diabetic or you are already dealing with one of these conditions, then you need to bump that up to 80%. We recommend. Now, the other 30% or the other 20%, whatever you're eating, please make sure it's whole and it's coming from a clean source. So if you are eating the chicken, the fish, please make sure that you're eating as organic as possible. Strategy number 3, exercise. So once again, we talked about the major activators of insulin resistance, and lack of movement is one of those activators. Therefore, exercise is going to be a deactivator. And so when you start moving, when you start exercising, you have to understand that once again, every single contractility, every single movement requires energy. It requires fuel. That fuel is coming from the glucose. And so when you start working out and you start feeling that burn, the reason why you're feeling a burn is because that is your body letting you know that the fuel in that cell where you're feeling the burn is to the point where it's running out. And matter of fact, you're going to get to the point where you actually have to stop because you just feel like you can't move anymore. That is because that cell is completely depleted of the actual glucose and glycogen. And so when you take that break, your body will now become a sponge. Your muscles will become a sponge for the glucose in the bloodstream, and it's going to pull in that glucose. And the best part of it pulling in that glucose is, guess what? It doesn't need insulin. When you start exercising and you start lifting heavy and you start feeling that burn in your muscles, this is a great thing because your muscles will now override the need for insulin receptors and insulin, and it will bring in that glucose and lower that blood sugar without the need of insulin. So please get moving. Strategy number 4, sunlight, herbs, vitamins, and minerals. So once again, nutritional colonizers are depleting you of your vitamins, your minerals, and so many things that your body would use in a normal basis to actually recover, heal, and repair. So when that is taking place and you're not replenishing it, you're still at a disadvantage. And so when you are eating healthy, that is more than enough to help replenish and recover yourself. However, if you're looking for more assistance as far as getting more vitamins and minerals, then yes, take a healthy, a high quality multivitamin, but also herbs. There are so many herbs that are so beneficial when it comes to decreasing insulin resistance, increasing insulin sensitivity. And so I highly recommend that you check those out. In this book, I have a whole list that I recommend that you look into taking on a daily basis or every other day. But something else that I want to make sure that we talk about is vitamin D. So vitamin D is not a vitamin, it is a hormone. And you have to understand that if you are Black, African American, or of African descent, or if your skin is black or brown, you have melanin, you have the ability to tan, you need to understand that you need vitamin D. You need hormone D. Our skin denotes the fact that we should be getting sunlight. And so when you have skin that has the ability to tan, you have what they call melanin, you have the ability to darken, you need sunlight because this means that your body was designed to be around sunlight and it was designed to actually absorb more sunlight because you would be outside. We have to also understand that most of the country is vitamin D deficient. However, when we get to the Black community, almost 85 to 95% of the Black community is vitamin D deficient. This is not a small problem. This is a huge problem. I have gone as far as calling this an epidemic. You have to understand that if you are Black and vitamin D deficient, you are paying at a huge disadvantage. Please get outside. I know they told you to stay away from the sun, and you've seen how that has gotten us as far as the advice goes. We are now vitamin D deficient on levels that this world has never seen before. So please get outside, get some sunlight. If you are living in an area where it's hard to get sunlight, then take a high quality vitamin. But also make sure you understand that vitamin D in a bottle that's coming in the form of a capsule can't compare to the actual sunlight. So please get outside. And next, but certainly not least, fasting. Fasting is my gospel. Fasting is king. Fasting is everything. Fasting is the one thing that I know for sure, without the shadow of a doubt, that if we as a community grasped onto it and practiced it, it would radically improve our health conditions overnight. Now, when you look at the physiology of what I was talking about with glucose and insulin and glycogen and the liver having to convert glucose into fat and ship it off, how do you think not eating would fit into this whole entire equation? When you eat, glucose goes up, insulin goes up. When insulin goes up, you are storing. If you're storing, you're not burning. However, when glucose goes down, over time, your body's going to start to need more fuel. When your body needs more fuel, it's going to convert the glycogen into glucose. When you convert glycogen to glucose, your body only has a limited supply of that glycogen. And so it's going to get to the point where eventually that glycogen is going to run out as well. Luckily for us all, the body is intelligent enough to turn the fat into glucose and continue to use that as fuel. This is what happens when we start fasting. Your body will switch fuel sources. They call it the metabolic switch, when your body's going from glucose to fat as fuel. This is extremely healthy. When your body does this switch on its own, this is extremely healthful. This is going to now decrease the amount of fat that you have in your liver, as well as your pancreas, but overall in your entire body. Fasting is a complete game changer. And fasting alone, I've seen fasting alone reverse insulin resistance and diabetes, while the other metrics stay the same. I've seen patients just do the fasting, just eat one meal a day, or do 24 hours or a 48-hour fast, and be consistent with the intermittent cycling of the fasting, and reverse insulin resistance and reverse diabetes and get off medications. That is how strong fasting is. Now, of course, I recommend that you do all of these habits that I'm telling you about. I recommend that you do all of these strategies that I'm telling you about. However, if they all seem overwhelming, all right, cool, I get it. But please, at least fast. And when I'm talking about fasting, I'm talking about 16 hours a day, 18 hours a day. If your last meal is at 6 p.m., do your best not to eat anything until the next day at 12 noon. Just drink water the whole entire time. Trust me, you will be extremely surprised and pleased at what happens. Now, of course, if you're on medications, check with your doctor, check with your healthcare provider to get advice, because he or she has the knowledge to assist you in that situation. But knowing healthcare, they probably don't have the information. They probably don't have the knowledge.
Come on, chill out.
You
bro.
ain't got the answers.
Relax.
You ain't got the answers.
I'm asking you.
You
a
ain't
question.
been doing the education,
bro.
You ain't been doing the education.
So you may have to look up this information by yourself. And a good start is by getting this book, Done with Diabetes. So click the link in the description if you want to get this book. All right, everybody. So this wraps up the video. This wraps up Insulin Resistance Explained. So in this video, just a quick recap. We talked about what insulin resistance is. Now we understand that insulin resistance is not a disease. It is not a dysfunction. It is a protective mechanism. This is what your body is supposed to do when it's faced with a surplus of energy. Then we talked about how insulin resistance is created. We understand that processed foods, also known as nutritional colonizers, plus eating it frequently is enough to cause insulin resistance. We also understand that lack of movement also assists in creating insulin resistance. Then we talked about why insulin resistance is such a problem. We understand that the insulin being high and the glucose being high is going to cause damage to our smaller vessels and our larger vessels, leading to things such as blindness, kidney damage, heart attacks, strokes, and so much more. Then we talked about what to do to prevent and reverse insulin resistance. So please make sure you go back through and you watch this video. Also, please make sure you share this video, like this video, subscribe to the channel, because I'm going to continue to release more and more videos about everything we spoke about in this video, but in an individual way. And please share this video. Share this video. There's so many people dealing with this condition. They have no idea what it is. No one's ever explained it to them. They're just taking medications. They have no idea what's going to happen, what to do next. They feel hopeless. They feel lost. Please share this video with them to help them get started in the right direction. Share this video with them to help them feel empowered and to actually know what actions they need to take, but also let them know that this is preventable and reversible. All right. Also, don't forget to click the link in the description to get your free copy of Done with Diabetes. I'm telling you, this book is great to help you understand what diabetes and insulin resistance is. But not only that, it gives you a step-by-step 90-day plan on how to reverse it. So make sure you pick that up. Let's make a great gift for yourself or for a family or friend. All right, everybody. So thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope I was able to help you out in understanding what insulin resistance is, as well as what to do to reverse it and prevent it. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you share this video out with your family and your friends and anyone who could benefit from this information. Also, do me a quick favor and let me know below in the chat what you would like to see me talk about as pertains to Black health improvement. All right, so this has been your brother, Edward Williams. And as always, please remember, this is our community, our responsibility. We have what it takes, so let's get it. Peace.
Or why don't you empower yourself and don't need them and do it yourself?
How, Sway?
Take a few steps back to go.
You ain't got the answers, man.